Around 125 years ago, there was a movement going on that is now termed, and it was somewhat at that time, New Thought. A new look at truth. A look that didn't say, I'm attached to these words, this teacher, this text, but saw underneath all of that the pointer to a truth deeper, more profound, more integral to actually living that truth day to day. Well, in that context, there were people that you've probably heard of. Emily Cady might be one of those teachers or writers at that time who began to talk about truth in her book, Lessons in Truth. Thank you, Donna. Then, of course, there was Mary Baker Eddy. You're familiar with Mary Baker Eddy. And perhaps another person that you may have heard the name, Emma Curtis Hopkins. These teachers were attractive to people who were seeking. And there were two people in Kansas City who were seekers. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founders of Unity. But at that point, they would listen to teacher after teacher. Charles studied Brahmanism, Buddhism, everything that he could think of to really find the truth, because he wasn't satisfied with what he had. Well, one day they had a visiting lecturer, one of these New Thought teachers, D.B. Weeks was his name, and Charles E.B. I put it down wrong. I have my spell correct here. E.B. Weeks came and spoke in Kansas City, and Myrtle and Charles went, and I'm not sure how Charles felt about it, but Myrtle was startled by one phrase. That's, I am a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. Well, Myrtle had been given a sentence of a couple of years to live because she was living with tuberculosis. But this truth just so penetrated her that she was changed forever by that. So she went home and began to live out that truth which she had discerned, which resonated with the very truth that was within her. And she began the practice of talking to her body, talking to all the organs of her body. She said this, I went to all the life centers of my body and spoke words of truth to them, words of strength and power. She was inspired, and immediately she had a transformation in her life. Charles was a little bit different. By the way, she was healed within a couple of years and began a healing ministry that affected many, many people and comes down to us yet today. Her husband, Charles, was of a scientific turn of mind, and he didn't quite want to, he knew something was happening with Myrtle, and he couldn't deny that, but he couldn't understand it for himself. So he began to take all these teachings from all of these teachers and try to assimilate them and put them together in a way that worked for him. Whoops, hold on. Little break. In a book called The Story of Unity, I want to give you Charles' words because they apply to what we want to talk about today. After listening to these teachers, Charles said this. These are his words. I noticed that all the teachers and writers talked a great deal about the omnipresent, omniscient God, who is spirit and accessible to everyone. I said to myself, in this babble I will go to headquarters. If I am spirit, and this God they talk so much about is spirit, we can somehow communicate. or the whole thing is a fraud. I then commenced sitting in the silence every night at a certain hour and tried to get in touch with God. There was no enthusiasm about it, no sole desire, not like Myrtle, but a cold, calculating business method. I was there on time every night and tried in all conceivable ways to realize that my mind was in touch with the Supreme Mind. Charles kept at it for month after month after month, affirming in the silence these truths that he had been hearing that sort of attracted him, but they weren't yet his. He hadn't brought them home. It became a habit for him, and he kind of liked the habit after a period of time. And then he began to have, of all things, dreams, very realistic dreams. And he realized that some of the dreams he had before the exact same thing happened in his real physical life in this world. So he says this to continue. I watched my dreams closely and found that there was a wider intelligence manifesting in my sleep than I seemed to possess in the waking state. And it flashed over me one day that this was the mode of communication that had been established in response to my desire for information from headquarters. This had been kept up ever since with growing interest on my part, and I could fill a large book with my experiences. Everything which it is necessary for me to know is shown to me, and I have times without number been saved from false steps by this monitor. As you heard, the title of the message today is Be Still and Know. So that phrase comes from a scripture in the Hebrew scriptures in the Psalms. And it was said in the midst of a very turbulent time. This be still and know. I want to read you just a few things that are in this psalm, Psalm 46. It says affirmatively, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. God is in the midst of the city, it shall not be moved. The Lord of hosts is with us. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. So I've taken those first four words, be still and know, and that little conjunction and I've set aside for a moment. And I want to emphasize today three words, be, still, and know. We'll talk about being, talk about stillness, talk about knowing. So hang with me, here we go. Being, I equate with identity. We've all asked at times, why am I here? What's the purpose for my life? What is this all about? And that has been true of people time immemorial. But I think we often go in the direction that isn't really helpful for us, doesn't get us to the truth, in that we look at the roles that we play to define who we are, to tell us what our identity is. I'm a father, I'm a mother, I'm a parent, I'm a teacher, or whatever it is for you. These roles that we play are not who we are. There's sometimes almost something that takes our attention away from knowing our identity. Because if you've been around Unity a little bit, you know that we're going to talk about our divine identity in addition to our human identity, because we are both. So if we're not going to do roles, what are we going to do to look to something that will be helpful in us for establishing, claiming, and living confidently the identity that we have. And I think that one thing is true. Now, a number of you in this room will remember yesterday that we wrote on little cards. Yesterday was a little workshop here for board members in Unity churches. Well, I don't know where the third one is, but we had 3 cards. Oh, they're all here. We wrote 3 values that we hold in our lives. And then we whittled it down to one that's the most important thing. And then we put them all together. And together we wrote an affirmative statement for the group that was around the table where we're at, for each of our churches, is really what it was. Values, whether it's honesty, whether it's integrity, generosity, courage, faith. Look into yourself. Don't look outside, look inside. Look to yourself. What value, if you could pin one down, would be most important for you? You're getting very close to your identity. And if you've chosen something like integrity or courage or generosity, you've linked up with a divine attribute that is yours not only as a human, but as one divine as well. For we are not just human, we are divine. Remember, those roles that we talked about are outside. The values that we have are inside. One of my favorite inspirational spiritual authors is Eckhart Tolle. And in a book, which is my favorite, A New Earth, he says this. He's talking again about the time when things aren't going especially well for you. And he says, whenever you become anxious or stressed, outer purpose has taken over, and you have lost sight of your inner purpose. You have forgotten that your state of consciousness is primary. All else is secondary. It's a little hard in the way our world often works to think of our consciousness as being the most important thing, the inside stuff. But it is. That's the primary point in the beginning of knowing. Because remember, we're going be still and know. We'll get there. So if I were to say that a key spiritual truth overall, I would say be still and know is our truth for today. 4 words. But it could also be said, be still. Period. Let me go on to that stillness. When I was a kid, well, I equate stillness with presence. Stillness, presence. Just for me, that works. When I was a kid, I remember the teacher taking attendance. Anybody remember that? And, well, I'm at the end of the alphabet. Worthington comes at the end. And so it was a long time until I got to say present. And it was present, not here, because it was very formal. And I have to tell you, I wasn't very present until about the S's or the T's, and then I was thinking, well, I better pay attention now. Well, that's not the kind of presence we're talking about, that you try to get present just when you absolutely have to. We're talking about presence in a different sense. We're talking about presence in the physical world. You know, when you're face-to-face with someone, you're present to them. That means, to use another term from way back, you give them your undivided attention. You don't multitask. You're not on your phone completing a text while you're face-to-face with them. but you're giving them your complete attention. In the physical world, that's the way it works. But even more important than that physical world is your thought world. Because you have so many thoughts racing around, monkey mind we call it, so easy to just be taken up by all those many thoughts and being present not really to any of them. There's a thing that I think I got introduced to by Deepak Chopra called single-pointed awareness. Single-pointed awareness. That's reflected of Tibetan Buddhist practice called samadhi, in which we give our complete attention to one thing. It's sometimes called concentration meditation. And I remember, without knowing that this is what it was, experiencing a little bit of that. One time I attended a little workshop led by a Buddhist monk, and we did a walking meditation. And I can just remember how I gave my attention to heel and toe, the earth beneath my feet. That was where my attention was. So in our mind, if we can choose that, which really is where we need to be, and give our single-pointed awareness to that thing, if we can practice samadhi, we can be still. We are on our way to knowing. Now, there are a few things that can prevent that. Laziness. I have to confess I'm sometimes there. Forgetfulness. I'm sure none of you experience that. How about wandering thoughts? That monkey mind. Or maybe even depression, which takes you away from that single-pointed awareness. Or the unwillingness or forgetting to correct those things when they happen, because they're going to happen. How about going back and giving another start at it? When your mind strays and goes to something else, when you forget about it, just bring it back. Start again. That's good enough. That's exactly where you should be. When we're in that thought-feeling world, we get to choose our thoughts and feelings. Novel idea. I choose my thoughts. I choose my feelings that come forward as a basis for my thoughts. I choose. One of the wonderful truths that I love, that we are creatures of choice. We're created to choose, created to create. Sometimes the thoughts are still there, they're on the periphery. We've put them on the sidelines for a moment. That's all right, they're going to be there. Just keep that single pointed awareness going. You can choose for, if you were to practice samadhi as the Buddhists do, you could choose a particular thought, a particular object even, that you want to concentrate on. And you do that day after day after day after. It's not just a 10-minute thing. Something that continues day after day. Like Charles Fillmore, who said, month after month after month, I made these same affirmations. Don't get weary. Day after day, week after week, month after month. That comes to you, this is what I need to concentrate on. Hang with it. Don't easily let it go. Matter of fact, don't let it go at all. And then we get to knowing. Being, stillness, and now knowing. This is a track we've been on. And now we're getting to the knowing part. And so easy it is for us to say, I don't know. But we have the ability, created as we are, to know so much more than we think we are. Remember, we're both human and divine. We're a divine expression, we're a human expression. We blend those two. And when we blend them, we're able to access the truth of the universe because we're connected, the divine connected to all that is. So knowing is, first of all, beginning to at least allow ourselves to say, I can know. I don't mean education. I don't mean you've studied a lot and you have a lot of stuff you can feed back and tell other people you know. Not knowledge, but knowing. Not education, not a library full of textbooks, but knowing. I like the teacher Ram Dass. Everybody familiar with Ram Dass? Here's what he says. It's not one that knows it knows. It's not you that know you know, or somebody else that knows they know. That's the frontal lobe, he says, of the brain. It's just knows. It's just knows. It knows because it is. So when we have that connection with being, we have the capability of knowing. The way we do that often, and the word we use, is that we have intuition to help us do that. Instead of mind only, we have that comes from within us, that is just a knowing. And many of us, me for many years, were pretty much totally unaware of that. And I discounted that. Ram Dass tells a story. He was in the city of Benares in India. Benares is the city of dying. It's an auspicious place to die, and many people go there to the river Ganges, and they go to bathe in that river, and they transition into another life. So it's kind of almost a macabre place in some senses, but he was there with a friend, and as he was going to that area for bathing, to observe that, and perhaps to bathe, he went by a great number of lepers. Said he estimated there were about 125 of them there, 125 lepers. They all had their begging bowls. So he fished in his pocket and found out they had 20 coins. 20 coins, 125 lepers. What do I do? So he began to go down the line of beggars, and he said, oh, that woman doesn't have any arms. Clink, there went one coin. This one is horribly disfigured. Clink, another coin. And another, and then after about 3, he stopped and he said, I don't need to go through this mental exercise every time. I'll just give when I know it's right to give. And so he went down the rest of that line of 125 lepers, and when there was a whimsical urge within him, clink went the coin. Interesting, guess what he found out? They had a union. They shared everything together after all. But the point being is that it doesn't come by figuring it out. That knowing comes almost whimsically from something within us. You all probably experienced it. Somehow you know something, not based on facts or figuring, but you know it. And it's true. This knowing transcends our usual physical awareness. It transcends our senses. So you might say, well, I know this because I saw it. I know this. I heard somebody say that. Or, I know that fruit is really sweet because I tasted it. That's not the kind of knowing we're talking about. We're talking about that knowing that arises from within us. Remember, from within us. And we know. We just know. It's reliable and it's true. It's a blending of our humanity and our divinity and expressing in this world. It arises from our isness, to use a word, our beingness, our oneness with all that is. And so we have that key spiritual truth again, just so simple: be still and know. I've had the privilege to be at Unity Village. And you can't see it, and I didn't put it out. Come look at it afterwards. I'm going to set it on the table. There's a little, we'll tack it up on the board so you can come and look at it. A hallway leading to a small prayer chapel. And Tom, will you put that slide up? Small prayer chapel that says simply, about 8 or 9 seats in this prayer chapel. And you'll recognize the person in the photograph. Peace, be still. Peace, be still. Be still and know. I have another one here too. There's a couple of things you want to come up and take a look at. In the quiet, in the silence, is the knowing. So now we get to the point that I get to every time. How do I do that? How do I do that? I'm going to suggest a couple of things. Number one, do that exercise that we did. Write down a value. The value that you hold dear, that's representative of you. You're getting very close to a sense of being. Not of doing, but of being. Then I think it's also important to act like a child. Children, they don't think about what they're planning to do tomorrow. They just know something. They know this seems good. They know they want to explore that. They talk to individual friends, imaginary friends. They're just daydreaming. I imagine you probably had a parent who said, "Oh, stop daydreaming and get on with it." Well, I say keep on daydreaming. So when you're able to act like a child, you're able more quickly to access your sense of being that leads to stillness, that leads to knowing. Many years back, I wrote a story. Interestingly enough, Donna, based on The Wizard of Oz. I think I called it Daydreaming. I don't remember the title, but I looked it up. And I just want to read you the last paragraph of the story, because it struck me that somehow I knew something back there that I didn't know I knew. In the story, the character is not Dorothy, but Dee Dee. Dee Dee looked up. The sky really was blue. The clouds really had passed. And what she really dreamed really did come true here in this magical land. But she was in a dream, and she knew that. Could she dream in real life and have that come true as well? For the second time, the voice of her father came through. Dee Dee! Dee Dee! Could she dream in real life and have that come true? From within her came the answer. Why not, Dee Dee? Why not? With regard to stillness, You're going to have to experiment with it, but practice single-pointed awareness. Give your attention to one thing, one object, one thought, and stay with it, and stay with it, and stay with it. And then I say, go intuitive. Get whimsical. Just let it come. Let the answer come. Be still and know. Remember Charles and Myrtle back at the beginning? I like to think that Myrtle, inspired and just changed immediately, really exemplified being. And that turned out in a marvelous change in her life. Stillness, Charles decided to do that. I'm going to sit in this chair every night at such and such a time. But Myrtle did that too. She sat in a chair, spoke to her body, spoke to the chair as though Jesus were sitting on the chair. Stillness. For her, a miraculous healing, and for many others. And then finally, knowing. As Charles did, author of many, many books of spiritual wisdom. How did he know that? By being in the stillness, being in the silence. Once again, be still and know. And so it is.